Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this very special event. I'm really honoured that we're able to do this. A big thank you to Will at Renard Press for making this possible. We're marking Refugee Week. It's Refugee Week here in the UK. I'm not sure if all of you are in the UK, but this week from the 19th to the 25th of June is Refugee Week here. And as a result, as my most recent novel published with Renard Press focuses on the theme of migration and refugees, and I've spent a lot of time doing work with refugees in the south of England on the Kent coast where I live. I was really keen to do an event that could focus on this question and talk to some other writers who have also worked on stories about travel, about asylum seeking and leaving your home in the hope of a better life or because of forced circumstances. So it's my great honour today to be joined by three fabulous writers. Diane Samuels, who is an award-winning playwright and also published, her forthcoming play is being published by Renard Press and has written numerous wonderful things, but particularly your play Kindertransport, is that right? Yes.
Kindertransport.
Beg your pardon. I'm a little flustered because we've had
it's fine. It's fine now.
Kindertransport, drawing on the experiences of children being transported during the Second World War. And Haitham Hussein, who is a Kurdish Syrian journalist and author of several books, but a book that I've read of his that I particularly enjoyed is No One May Remain, translated by Nicole Fares, which is a really fascinating narrative biography, sort of in dialogue with the work of Agatha Christie, about the experience of being displaced and being an asylum seeker. And then Rodaan Galidi, wearing the hat, who is joining us from Amsterdam. And Rodaan is the author of various books, also a poet, very celebrated in the Dutch language. And his work has been translated into English by Jonathan Reeder. He's written several novels, but the most recent one that I read was The Leash and the Ball, which is a story of an asylum seeker in the Netherlands. And so it's my great pleasure to be joined by these writers. And I thought it would be wonderful if we could start off by sharing briefly what brought us to write about these issues, what made us want to do that. So as I explained, I moved to the Kent coast a little while ago, and back when I moved, we were hearing stories of small boats crossing in the Mediterranean, but there weren't actually many small boats crossing here at the time. But it seemed to me clear that this was going to become more common. And so I wrote a story that brought together two characters who had two very different experiences of crossing the Channel. One who had been involved with the Dunkirk crossing back in the Second World War, and one who had arrived recently on a small boat, as many people are now doing. And through their interaction, I wanted to explore what these crossings meant and what it might be like when they became more common, as they are now. And so that was my motivation, and it gave me the opportunity to bring together storytelling that crosses cultures. That has always been something that fascinates me since my Reading the World project, and people speaking different Englishes. And so it was my attempt really to put the humanity back into the story of what's happening here, with people coming to the UK seeking safety, seeking shelter, and finding perhaps a slightly different reception to what they might have hoped for. Diane, what was it that brought you to write Kindertransport?
Well, it was quite a long time ago, and I suppose there were two incidents which brought me to write it. One was, so I had a friend, and this was around 1989, and she said to me that her father was going to a reunion of Kindertransport children, of Kindertransport refugee children. And I said, well, what's the Kindertransport? And she said, well, it was these transportations of mostly Jewish children out of Nazi-occupied territories in Europe in between 1938 and 39. It stopped when the Second World War began. And I was surprised because I grew up in a Jewish community in Liverpool, and I went to Jewish schools, And I'd never heard of the Kindertransport. And we were taught about the Holocaust, and we were taught about modern Jewish history. And I was thinking, well, why do I know nothing about this? And it wasn't something people knew about. And the thing about this friend is that she grew up in a very comfortable home just outside North London, and just outside London, actually. It's a kind of suburbs of, the home counties, that kind of area. She always had to know where her passport was. She always had to know. Like every day, she would make sure she knew where her passport was. And so what I was becoming aware of was that this generational impact of having had to flee for safety somewhere else, that you can inherit from your parent who has had that experience. Her father was on the Kindertransport. He was actually 17, so in fact, he shouldn't have come on it because the age limit was 16. And I think it was that drew to me, like, what are the long-term impacts of the experience and how is it passed on from generation to generation? And then the second thing was a friend of mine whose mother, had dated him, they were sitting in mourning. His mother was talking to a friend about her time in Auschwitz, and he had never known his mother had been in Auschwitz. So for me, it was the mystery of the experience of the generational thing. And really, for me, it's the impact of the trauma. So what is the traumatic nature of the experience and how do people deal with it? And in these cases, the territory is that of denial. So how denial is a mode of dealing with trauma and how that impacts the next generations. So I think that's what drew me into it. So it's the longer term effects.
Mm. And Haitham, how about you? What brought you to write about these issues?
Hi, Anne, and hi, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with you today. And actually, when I left my country, a lot of questions came in my mind. And it makes me asking myself, what can I do to explain this story to people, to tell them about our stories, about our memories, about our dreams and tears, everything. And those questions, I couldn't find answers for them. I've tried to tell other people our questions, because we didn't, as refugee now and that time, first, we didn't, for myself, or others who I knew them, we didn't plan to go to another place. We just want to live in safe place. And we didn't plan to leave our countries. We want to just live in safe place. And first I started to read about war literature, novels about war, about the war. But that question was, for me, this war is big sin. How can we avoid it? And then when I came to UK, I remember I've read Agatha Christie's memory. It was Come Tell Me How You Live. And she wrote some of her books, chapters of her books, when she was in my area with her husband, Max Mallowan, in my city and our area, Syria and Iraq and north of Syria. And then I've started asking myself, how can I tell other people here in UK, British people, about ourselves? I found that book is very good, a very good step to go to further and tell people how we are live. And I've chosen Agatha Christie. Come, I will tell you how I live. I didn't mean Agatha Christie exactly here, as you know. I meant British reader and European reader to know our problems, our dreams, our stories. That stories make us. And when I started to write this book, I discovered a new part of my identity, as I didn't stay as Kurdish and Syria, and before everything, I'm human, and now it's main part of my identity. I'm asylum seeker and refugee. And how can I explain this one for others? That was main questions for me, and still.
Fantastic. Thank you, Haitham. And Rodaan, how about you as well? What made you write about these issues?
Because a lot of Dutch writers, original Dutch people, are writing about refugees, but they never spend time in the refugees camp. They never ran away from Holland because of the war. And they never speak Arabic or Kurdish or Iranian or Persian or to understand what kind of people they are to write about them. When I began to read these books, I began to think, oh my God, I will never find myself in this book. They make the refugees person or very scared. Oh, please give me paper, let me stay. Or very angry, he want to kill everybody. Or very stupid, or very quiet. Is always extremely persons. I thought we are not like that, because there is a lot of intelligent people, there is a lot of criminals, and a lot of funny people. We are normal. And I thought I spent 9.5 years in refugees camp. It's longer than the First and the Second World War. I was sitting in this building with 55 people, 550 people. I was living 9.5 years between 550 people. They are my people. And they are not the same 550 people. Some of them have run away to another country, or they get some paper. Then I met maybe a few thousands in these years. I thought, I must write a book about us. I must show the Dutch people, maybe the European people, who we are. But it must be honest. We must not, the reader must not read a book for us as a victims for the war there, and West make the war there, and don't care about us. No, I don't like this cliche. I thought I will let the people visiting our mind. I will show them who we are exactly, without shame from who we are. And I thought that is the people here, we share with them country, them freedom, them job, them street. Why we don't share with them our mind? That wasn't my opinion, my idea to write a book about refugees, or 2 books actually.
Yeah, 2 books. Yeah, The Leash and the Ball,
and 2 blankets, 3 sheets.
2 blankets, 3 sheets.
Yeah, the first book is about this 9.5 years in the refugees camp, and the another book is about my life when I left the refugees camp. Yes.
So, I mean, Rodaan, I'm interested because your story is fascinating in itself, but you chose to write fiction rather than a memoir.
I told you, before I began to be refugees, I was writing from my childhood, writing books, reading books, poems. Words the words are my family, my home, dictionaries, and I have an opinion about fiction and non-fiction. If I read Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie, where Haitham get about, or Shakespeare or Goethe, or when they write very fiction, get non-fiction. It is Shakespeare was never Macbeth, but when he write tomorrow and tomorrow, oh my God, it is very real, but very not real.
Yeah.
And I think the more beautiful books are fiction, and they change to very non-fiction, or non-fiction and change to fiction. This changing of identity is the imagination of the reader.
Yeah, I feel that strongly myself. I mean, I think that's what storytelling does at its best, and it's certainly with my novel, that was my attempt to take people into the human experience. That's what I wanted to do.
And another thing, the story is very heavy. And I don't want the reader read and they say, my God, is this happening in Holland? We are tolerance. How spend somebody 9.5 years the refugees come? They don't believe it. I thought I let them, okay, they don't need to believe it, but I need that they read it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Diane, you put your work on the stage. What does telling stories like this on the stage enable you to do as a writer?
Well, I think what happens in the theatre is you have a collective experience, and if the plays that the plays I tend to write, and Kindertransport is one, is they're very intimate plays. So it's all set in a woman's attic, and actually it goes kind of inside her psyche. So what you get is the experience of people sitting in a collective space, experiencing together something they normally only experience privately. And often at the end of the play, people would be crying. And so I think there's something about the shared nature of this present experience that occurs that takes the private into the collective domain. And it's very powerful. I mean, theatre is a very powerful thing. It's in the now, and it's not in your head. Your body's there. It's in the body, you know. So there's something very transformative about it, and powerful. Yeah, I love it. It's multidimensional. You hear things, you see things, you know, you become immersed in it, and not you alone, but other people. And there would be like loads of people would write to me or come and talk after the show that people had come who'd been on the Kindertransport, like maybe their child had said, will you go and see this play? And they'd never really talked about it, and they'd watched the play with their child together, and then at the end they'd actually have the first conversation about what their mother or father would tell them for the first time ever what they'd gone through, and they never told them before. So it kind of opens up channels of communication. It's about relationship with others, and I think reading a novel is much more of a private experience. Reading a book, you go into the internal world, you're connecting with the author and kind of taking on the experience internally, which is like you go on this internal amazing voyage. What happens in the theatre is you go on it with others.
Yeah, that's a really powerful way of describing it. Haitham, you have written novels, but your book, No One May Remain, is not a novel. Why did you decide not to write fiction? What made you want to write it as a sort of memoir narrative?
The main thing was to write directly. When you write fiction, some people will say, okay, this is just fiction. But when I choose to write it as an autobiography, I've said, okay, this is directly, this is who I am, here my ideas, here my opinions about myself, about my environment here, about other people here and there, between East and West. And now I didn't want to go and directly way to keep people like distraction or think about what I want to say. But here I wanted to say, and I wrote it like directly as I said. And this one was main reason for me to write it nonfiction. A lot of issues came with when you explain something directly. It could be, I don't want to say dangerous to misunderstood, but it's when you say it directly. Sometimes it came from your when you write with open heart and open mind. And I think that others will read it with open mind and open heart, and they can understand my situation, my ideas, my opinions about each others. And the other thing was most important for me. There are common spaces between us. I wrote about this. How can we make it wider and wider then? Because a story, as Diane said, story stages are very powerful, and how we can use this to be together, to be more close together, to understand each other more, with this stories. I don't want to say to tell people here is this is wrong and this is right. I want just to tell my readers and other people's our stories, and they will decide. They will decide where is the wrong and why we are here, and how we can live together. And this is some of my dreams or hopes.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Rodaan, it really struck me earlier when you were talking about one of your motivations for writing being that you were seeing Dutch writers writing about the refugee experience, and that you felt you weren't seeing yourself in the book, because that was something that I thought about really carefully when I was drafting my novel. Should I be telling a story that is a story about someone who he's not actually a refugee, but he's a climate refugee, really. He's what was at the time called an economic migrant in the UK, and there was a distinction being drawn. I was concerned that if I was to do this, I needed to do it well. I needed to present a full person, exactly as you were describing, that it mustn't be someone who fell into one of those cliches or rehearsed the same stories. And I felt a real responsibility to get it right and to do it justice, and also to the motivation, I think, for writing for me was similar to you, in that the stories I was seeing being told about the situation struck me as false, and as kind of one-sided, stereotyped. I saw a lot of anger, a lot of dehumanizing of many of the people involved, and it was my challenge, as I said, was to try and put the humanity back into the situation. But it is, I think, as a writer who hasn't experienced seeking asylum myself, it was something I felt a great deal of responsibility about to get right. Diane, did you have similar feelings when you were writing about this issue, as someone who hadn't had direct personal experience of it?
I think coming from a detached perspective is really helpful. I think you bring another eye view on it, and I think the key things was I interviewed quite a few of the kinder who were at the time in their 50s and 60s, and it's about listening, really deeply listening, and hearing, and absorbing that, and just being empathetic and sensitive to it. I tend to pick up the emotion whenever I meet people. I tend to pick up the emotional quality of where someone is. So in a sense, it can be a curse in that I can get overwhelmed by other people's feelings, but I think as a writer it's a gift, because it enables me to express, to really tune in, and there's a kind of surrender of yourself. It's about, I'm listening to you. And I mean, there is a form of theatre, which is an amazing form of theatre, which is used as a kind of tool to help people move forwards in situations they're in or experiences they're having, which is called playback theatre, where the company, this is actually a practical theatre mode. They listen to people talking about whatever it is they're struggling with, and then they give it back to them, and they let the person sit outside of it and watch what they have just shared, and then they get to change the action. The person who's had the experience can start to change the action, and sort of say, well, could you do that instead, or can you? And there's something about that was what I was kind of bringing to this story, was this thing of giving back. And people would watch it and they'd say, how do you know that it was like that? And it was because I think it's this deep listening. I think that's the job, is the
That's
deep
so interesting.
listening.
Yeah,
You're kind of bearing witness. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting. Years ago I was a Samaritans volunteer, and in fact we were trained to listen, but one of the techniques that we would often use would be at kind of giving back. So you almost repeat back to the person what they've said, use the words they've used so they can hear it being said.
Yeah.
Marathons, I don't know if you know, Rodaan, it's a helpline in the UK for people in crisis. So it has people who listen to people's problems, and that was what I did years ago. Rodaan, are there particular duties or responsibilities that you felt writing about these issues? Were there any things that you felt you had to be careful about or be mindful of?
Yes, when I left the refugees camp to live outside between the people in the country, I discovered that the people, when you tell them the truth exactly, they will get very scared.
Mm.
They are not the people from the war, when what we see in the movies, all this power, they come fight with the Marines or with this Great Britain. They go to Iraq, they catch Saddam Hussein, they catch, I don't know what, Mussolini, they kill Hitler. I thought these European people are all supermen. They are very strong. They are from iron. But when you talk to them in the street, they are very scary people. And I discovered I must be very careful when I write. I must make it little bit funny, the story. If it's very dramatic, I write it very funny. When he read it the first time, he must laugh. The second time, laugh. But more than 2 times, he must be cry. And this, it took me years to have this technique. I learned it little bit from.
Yeah, fascinating.
And he's very lonely. No one listens, and he goes to his home and he told that his child is died. It's very funny, but when you read it, sorry, we was asking them, yeah.
No, that's okay. Don't worry. You broke up a bit, but that's okay. No, that's really, really fascinating. Haitham, how about you? Were there any things that you felt you had to be careful about, or that you felt responsibilities?
Yes, actually, it was a lot of things are sensitivity. I found myself, I have to like avoid those sensitive things about I didn't want to hurt people about my ideas, about my how I see problems here, and how they see other people as refugee. And some of them, they didn't want to see refugee here or asylum seeker, and others see them as a number. I don't want to say about those people they are wrong or right, but they are scared. They are scary people. They as Rodaan mentioned, they have their scary things we as all refugees came here to steal their jobs, their life, to brought their problems from their countries to their countries now. And another thing was challenge for me, how to avoid this stereotype and that makes people go through it, and how to tell them to see us as human, as a story, without those stereotypes and those all restrictions, all views. When you came from our ideas or that stereotypes, they will build high walls between you and others. And my challenge was, how can I avoid these walls without any anger, without any problems with others. I just want to tell them, and you cannot tell them. I wanted to tell them with love, not with hate. Yeah.
I'm so struck by both Haitham and Rodaan, you talking about being conscious of people being scared. being scared of what you have to say. I think that's really, really thought-provoking, actually.
And it's important thing, Anne.
Yeah.
This about scary things. Asylum seekers and refugees are scary people now, and they have their scary things in their inside, and they want, when they meet other people, they look like scary people. They don't know how can they be normal in normal situation, and it takes time the thing to be normal.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. I mean, Rodaan obviously you were talking about using humor to build those bridges. Haitham, how did you break through those stereotypes? What techniques did you use to try to build those bridges?
I went to Agatha Christie's book, and she had her stereotypes about our people there and 70 years ago. And now when I talk about when I wrote about Agatha Christie's story types and tell people here and other, it started from question actually. I met a guy here. He asked me, do you have a traffic light in your country? I just laughed and said, no, I came from desert, and I brought all my
even in the desert they have a big Mercedes and
yes,
yeah.
and this questions guide me to others to explain. We didn't came from desert, and we had our lives, our cities, our stories, everything, and we didn't plan to came, but now we are here, and we need to understand each other, and you need to hear my stories, to read my stories, not just because I'm refugee, because I'm your partner now. Now I'm here, and this is my present and my future, my daughter's future here, and we need to understand each other. And with writing, it wasn't easy to explain those ideas by easy way. Sometimes with and this direct way helped me to go slowly and clear and sensitive, actually.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think you're all saying the same. I think we're all sort of saying the same thing actually, about this listening, about paying attention to what people are giving us, what energy people are giving us, and how we can connect with that energy and perhaps change perspective. Diane, you talked about the giving back idea, the playback theatre. Were there other techniques that you used to build human connection between the audience and what was happening on the stage?
Well, there's a kind of sense of having to piece things together. So what you get is it's set in the attic of a woman in the 1980s, a woman in her probably mid to late 50s, whose daughter is kind of going off, leaving home, and she's living on her own. She's divorced from her daughter's father. And so you see them going through this story of this mother and her 20-odd-year-old daughter. And it's a separation story, really. And then in this story, in this attic room with cases and boxes, you also have a little girl who's about 9 years old, with her German mother sewing. And the audience need to go, how does that little girl sewing a button on her coat because she's being sent off the next day on a train to go to England from Hamburg in Germany, how do they connect? So it's like the audience need to piece it together. I think the way our lives often work is that it's not in straight lines, it's in bits, and the way we remember things and the way we experience things in pieces. We'll remember something, suddenly it will come to us, or we'll be experiencing something that will remind us. So it's this thing of our lives are in kind of, we experience our lives in pieces, and it's how we bring it all together. And then there's a surprise towards the end, a revelation. So you know, there's something about story, isn't there? You know, this is what everyone's talking about here. Someone starts a story, whether it's presented as actual life or presented as fiction based on actual life, or it's entirely of the imagination, which will always be drawn from what's been going on anyway for you. And it's almost like as soon as you start, and there was so and so, and then they had to leave, and you're immediately gripped. You want to know what's going to happen to them. You know, you want to know, where does this end up? Is it a tragedy? Is it a comedy? Is it, you know, are they going to make it? This is a universal human thing, you know. In a way, we're all storytellers, aren't we? And we're applying that craft to what our experience of life has been. And we're all sitting around the campfire, and people are kind of going, you know. So I think it's the audience bring their imagination, or the reader brings their imagination, and then they bring their own experience to it as well. I mean, stories are always about change, aren't they? And how we cope with change, and how we deal with it, and how we are changed. And you know, in a sense, that's what we're offering. This is what I've discovered about change, and in it, maybe in any story, we're helping whoever's reading or watching it to deal with change in their own lives. Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, comedy is humor is part of that bridge building technique, definitely as well. That and in my novel, it's the misunderstandings that often generate the humor, because both my characters speak Englishes that are not quite standard Englishes. My character with dementia, she is forgetting words, she's losing words, and so she often uses the wrong word, and she's constantly worried that other people are going to realize what's happening to her, or that she's going to miss what someone's saying. She doesn't understand. And Jonah, who has arrived from Malawi, he speaks fluent English, but it's a learnt English, learnt at school. And he's constantly worried that he's going to misunderstand a British idiom or miss something. And so because of this, they misunderstand each other quite a lot, but they also always think it's their fault, not the other person's fault. So because of this, they give each other space to have dignity and to be full people in a way that many other people don't give them. Rodaan, I wanted you to talk a bit more about comedy and humour in your work, because a lot of the humour in your work is based on the gaps between cultures as well. There are some brilliant scenes in your novel, The Leash and the Ball, where we see that how different attitudes to eating or to having dogs or whatever it might be generate all kinds of misunderstandings. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
When I came, I thought, when you write very dramatic, when you let everybody died in the 5 chapters, the people, they will like it. Oh, it's very heavy, nice book. But no, the people in Europe, they have everything except laughing. They don't have humor because they don't have time for. They have meeting in them job, they have meeting in them relationship, they have meeting in them shower, everywhere meeting and serious life. And I came from Iraq. I came from very lazy family. We was very rich without working. Very lazy university where the teacher come late 5 minutes. I discovered we are very rich in Iraq because we like to be that the time follow us. We don't follow the time, you know. And I began to make my mix, to write the situation in my eyes. I write about the situation as I see it as a refugees, but very honest way. And that the people like it very much, because I thought, as a refugees, you know, if you are musician, you are welcome in Europe. If you are a musician, a refugees, welcome. If you are chef cook, you are cooking very well, you are very welcome. And I think if you are refugees and you have a humor, you are also welcome. They like to laugh. The people, they need another culture in Europe. They need to laugh. They need to see how rich they are. They need the mirror. And we are the mirror for them. because we came from very stupid countries. Why we are there if we have a good countries? And they need us to talk very honestly about our country. We don't need to be proud, oh, Iraq, Babylon, blah, blah, blah. No, Iraq is Saddam Hussein, not Hammurabi or Nabucodonosor. When I make compare between situation in Iraq and here, they think, wow, my God, Holland is great. And that is discovering. I let them discover them normal life, how rich they are, because there is no one died because of they killed him, but because he's depressed or he's very old. I think as refugees, we have a lot of job to do in Europe, except be negative or busy to have a car, good car, or no, it is a nice continent, nice place. And the people really very quiet and nice. And the humor is really very nice to use humor for the. When I have a reading, before 20 years ago, I read serious stories, serious poems. Now, never. I write very funny situations, and the people buy all my books to sign it. Before, no one buy one book. Look, it's because the people thought I want to bring your signature to my home. You let me laughing. And that is really great. It is they don't need to somebody to tell them you are wrong, you're doing bad job with us. No, they know that they are very intelligent. They know everything. They can find even Saddam Hussein, they can't find him. They know everything in my mind, but one thing they cannot do it. To be funny. They cannot be funny. They are too serious and they don't have time for it.
I really love that idea about being a mirror, being that the refugees can show people living in the countries they come to their own country with fresh eyes. And that reminds me of what you were saying about the detachment, Diane, that actually the detachment can give a fresh perspective that is very valuable in storytelling. Really, really fascinating. Something I did want to talk briefly about was history. So Diane, both our work touches on the Second World War. You just before with the Kindertransport, and me, I have a character who did the Dunkirk crossing, and there's also a character in the book who was a deserter during the Second World War. And I wanted to ask you what it's like to write about a history that has been told, had so many stories told about it.
Well, it hadn't been told. That was the thing. It hadn't been told when it has been told subsequently, but in 1989 it hadn't been really told. And that was, and there was a woman called Bertha Leviton who was herself on the Kindertransport, and she was gathering people's stories because it was like, it was time people wanted to tell it, but they were children and they were separated from their parents, and they that has an impact. And I think they just wanted to get on with their lives for all that time. And it was when they reached their 50s and 60s that they started to find that it kind of came back and was kind of wanting to be acknowledged by them, let alone. And so they met for the first time as a group. I mean, I met some of them who said, I didn't even know there were other children going through the same experience, that they'd forgotten things. And so it hadn't been told. That's the whole thing. It was an aspect of that Second World War experience that had not been told.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And actually, I think I often thought that I would never write about the Second World War because I had real Second World War fatigue in my reading growing up, because there were so many stories that and finding something fresh to say about it. And I think it took me to get to a stage in my writing career where I could see how to connect with it in my own way. And it sounds as though you really found your own way to connect.
I mean, in the end, I don't think the play is about the Second World War, about the Kindertransport. I think what it's about is something every human being experiences, and that is being separated from your mother. That's what it's about. And some people have that in a a loving, gradual, we raise our children to manage without us. That's our job. And some people have it in a very disrupted, cut off, damaging way. And so everyone can hear that experience. We all have that experience. So that's what it's really about.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And Haitham, you're writing about events that are still playing out for many people, that are still real experiences in people's everyday lives. How does that feel, to be telling a story that so many people are living now or have lived recently?
Unfortunately, now the huge number in Kuwait, Ukraine, and Sudan, and Syria, and other places, and this problems became worse and worse. And as writer, I always thinking about the people, about their lives, and I don't think about the politician, how they decide to do these things, but I'm thinking always about those people. And unfortunately, I don't want to say no one cares, but still this huge number, we need to help them. And how, as writer, I can't help, I can write about them, I can write about the part of their life, because this is if this step will be their life, it's very sad time for them, and it will be very sad life for them and for each other. And the question is not how we can help them, and the main question, how can we stop the war? And when the writers, journalists, who they as Western British or European, the reader and the other people trust their writers, their journalists, when they write and speak and tell the people about those problems, they can push them to do something. The people here trust their writers. It's as a refugee, when I'm writing my story, okay, the people here in Britain or in European, they will read it. Maybe they want to know something, but they will have their questions. But when you write as a British writer and other writers, European writer, they trust you, they believe you, they will read you, they think about your opinions. And we all need to write about today and the refugees here, to help them, to help each other, to make their life is better, with not just helping them now, just to try to stop this war. Because when we all say our opinions and truly, and will help people more than just give them some foods or some clothes. Okay, this is important, but most important, how we avoid this problem to stop this war.
Yeah, really, really fascinating. I think, Rodaan, is that something that you feel too, that your writing can have an impact on the situation as it is? Can it make any changes?
No, I can't change nothing from the situation. I am very disappointed about the war in Ukraine, because I thought Europe let the war behind and they have peace now. I thought that European people will never be stupid to start the war. But I'm very disappointed how they go on with the war. They take about the half of the story and they let the another half behind. Because if you are refugees from the half of Zelensky, you don't need even to ask refugees. You are welcome. If you are refugees from the half of Putin, you are not welcome. They are two, both are European, and they are both have a right to run from the war. I'm really very disappointed about. I'm very happy for Ukrainian people, but I'm not happy for Russian people. People of Tolstoy, of Dostoevsky, Pushkin, and all these great people. They read Europe from Hitler and from Napoleon Bonaparte. These Russian people, If there is no Russia, we are speaking now German or French, you know. And somebody must take care about the Russian refugees. He must give them the chance to ask refugees here to have a safe place. Why the world is very close and very open for Ukraine. But I'm very happy for Ukrainian people. I am really very happy, but I would like to be happy also for another kind of refugees. I don't say let the world open for Iraqi people. I know the difference of the color eyes, the color of hair is very important in Europe now. We know, see it. But if you see that how they look to these two victims from one war, I am really disappointed.
Yeah, it is a dark time. You're right, and I think in Europe there are certainly. And I shared.
Even I want to write article in the newspaper. If I want to write about us in a newspaper, no newspaper allowed me to publish. I published it just in Instagram, and they blocked my Instagram, and I throw it away to get my Instagram because I need my friends there. It's really very dirty game now. I really disappointed. I would like that Europe, you know, Europe have a great name, you know. Europe have the justice, have this, you know, we are the world, we are further in the history. They doing now in this world the same in everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about it, you and Diana. I would like to hear.
Well, I mean, it's interesting what you say about the Russian refugees, because with the work I've done with refugees at the drop-in center where I work, I do see Russian refugees as well as other nationalities. So they seem to there are people coming from Russia who are coming here, maybe not in as big numbers, but I see that. I don't know what you think, Diane. Whether you have
this is interesting because I go back. My family, if you like, were refugees from, economic migrants, but actually it was pretty horrific for them where they were. They came from Ukraine and Poland and Russia.
Oh wow!
So I'm descended from people from that part of the world, and so I do feel a connection with them, but I also feel I'm very glad they left and that they were able to come somewhere to find refuge, because it was very dangerous dealing, you know, there were some very, very, very brutal pogroms, and life anyway was very tough. So I just feel solidarity with anyone who wants to find somewhere safe where they can thrive. I wouldn't differentiate between anyone. You
Absolutely.
know, I think, you know, the bottom line is people need to feel safe.
Yeah.
They need to feel safe emotionally, and they need to feel safe physically. And you know, we were talking about history, and there's so many people in this country who are the results of migrations, whether they're to seek refuge or whether they're exploring in an adventurous way to find somewhere, you know, whatever it is motivating. And I think it only enriches. I mean, London wouldn't be the city if it is by any means if it hadn't had influx after influx. I mean, my partner, he's very blonde, but his family are initially Vikings. You know, at some point, thousands of years ago along, they came from there, and you know, that's a whole different thing. And yeah, I think I feel so much that need for safety and need to thrive, not just survive.
Yeah.
We want to thrive, and anyone, you know, anything any of us can offer through. There's something so life enhancing about being an artist, about telling the story, about being the storyteller. I think just doing that, we are contributing towards the thriving, and we're kind of offering it as a model for others to tell their stories and share. And you know, I just think, you know, all power to anyone. Yeah, so That's what I feel.
I want to tell you something. It's great about this Ukrainian refugees and Russian. This great George Orwell in Animal Farm, he said all the animals are equal, but some animals are equaler than the others. It is wonderful.
Yeah.
This is literature can explain everything actually,
Yeah.
but explain it even a lot of time ago.
Absolutely. I mean, one of my reasons for writing Crossing Over was because at the time when I wrote it back in 2017, there was a big distinction being drawn between economic migrant and refugee. And to me, that was hugely problematic because I don't think you can draw that line so easily. And also, why shouldn't people move to seek a better life? Why shouldn't they, as you say, Diane, seek to thrive? And
it's a call to adventure as well.
Yeah.
And moving is a basic human it's a human impulse. It's what we do as human beings. And I think trying to stop it is only going to cause suffering and poverty of the spirit as much as poverty of the body. And
that, as they both said, you know, what's behind that is fear.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just seems to me that's what's and in a way the fear needs to be heard, to understand that fear, that in a sense to do the work to dispel it, or it does need to be heard. It's just that if only it would be expressed as I am afraid rather than being antagonistic towards people, that would be very helpful. So I'm afraid, I need to feel safe. That's really what it is underneath. But it's all layered up with opinions and prejudices and push away. And I think that's what's deep at the heart of it.
Absolutely. Well, the time has flown by and we're now at 7:30. I did want to ask if anyone wants to ask a question briefly, if everyone's got 5 minutes, but if you don't, you could put it in the chat if you don't want to speak. If not, we'll give it a moment, but if not, we will wrap it up. But I think, okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised or any chat questions. So I think we should probably, that's a brilliant place to leave it. I think that actually fear is what's underlying so many of these problems. And if only that fear could be expressed more honestly and explored and connected with more honestly, then perhaps we could get somewhere. And storytelling maybe is the way that we can try to do that. Oh, thank you, Sarah. Sarah says thank you. That's wonderful. And thank you everyone else for joining us. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you to Diane. Thank you to Haitham, and thank you to Rodaan.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
A real joy. Thank you.
Bye-bye.